Okay, let's dive into this explainer by addressing a really profound, deeply intimate experience, one that honestly we almost never speak about out loud. I'm talking about that chilling, paralyzing moment when your individual voice entirely vanishes just as the crowd around you begins to speak. You know the feeling, right? You see something happening, something you know in your gut is wrong. And yet, you completely freeze. You stay silent. Today, we're going to explore the hidden architecture of that exact silence. We'll be using the foundational insights of Gustave Le Bon to slowly unpack the heavy, invisible psychology behind why we freeze. So, have you ever wondered why your voice vanishes when the crowd speaks? Well, I want you to hear this loud and clear right from the start. This silence is absolutely not a personal, moral failing. It's not a lack of courage. Actually, this paralysis is the result of a deeply ingrained, almost biological human susceptibility to collective psychological forces. When we are swept up in a group, our minds are suddenly subjected to immense invisible pressures that literally override our normal programming.
To understand this, we have to realize that a crowd isn't just a physical gathering of people. No, under the right conditions, it transforms into what Le Bon calls a psychological crowd, and this is a fascinating state. It's a gathering where the sentiments and ideas of every single person suddenly take one unified direction, and their conscious personality, the very thing that makes you, you, entirely vanishes. The individual self essentially dissolves, replaced by a single, powerful collective entity. Think about the sheer contrast here. In isolation, you are restrained, you are responsible, you are fully conscious of the consequences of every action you take. But immersed in a crowd, you become invincible, completely anonymous, and entirely impulsive. This isn't just a mood swing. This radical transformation happens through three very specific, strictly defined mechanisms that completely overpower our human nature. Let's look at the first one. Mechanism 1, the invincible anonymous. The very first thing that happens when you merge into a large mass of people is that you acquire this overwhelming sentiment of invincible power. Solely from the math of it, from being one of thousands or tens of thousands, you suddenly feel untouchable. I mean, think about it. In isolation, your brain is constantly calculating risk. But in the mass, that risk is diluted into absolute nothingness. And because of that dilution, you are suddenly allowed to yield to primitive instincts that you would normally keep strictly locked away. Gustave Le Bon put it this way: a crowd being anonymous, the sentiment of responsibility, which always controls individuals, disappears entirely. Let those words sink in for a second. The protective anonymity of a crowd acts like a chemical solvent. It completely dissolves our normal, everyday moral restraints. When your face is just a blur in an endless sea of faces, the internal judge that polices your behavior, it simply packs up and leaves. Now, if you have ever failed to speak up in a group setting and later felt a crushing, heavy wave of guilt, you really must absolve yourself. Because in this first stage of crowd psychology, our conscious, restraining self is already dissolving. And honestly, we have to admit, there is a dark, strange relief in that. It is exhausting to constantly carry the weight of individual moral responsibility every single day. The crowd offers this dangerous, highly intoxicating vacation from being ourselves. Mechanism 2, mental contagion. So once you are anonymous and feeling invincible, the second phase kicks in, mental contagion. This is a phenomenon of a purely hypnotic order. Inside a crowd, every sentiment, every emotion, and every act spreads with terrifying rapidity. Normally, as human beings, we preserve our personal interest above all else. It's our core survival mechanism. But under the heavy spell of mental contagion, we willingly and instantly sacrifice our personal interest for the collective. This phenomenon is quite literally compared to the spread of microbes. It's an infection of the mind. Just think about it. You don't actively choose to catch a physical virus, right? It just happens. In the exact same way, you don't choose to catch the emotional frenzy of a crowd. It completely bypasses your rational filters. Before you even realize what's happening, your brain is essentially hijacked by the collective emotion of the people around you. An individual readily sacrifices his personal interest to the collective interest. So the crucial takeaway here is that when you stay silent in the face of the crowd's wrongdoing, it is an overpowering, contagious override of your conscious will. It is absolutely not an act of cowardice. It's a symptom of a powerful mental contagion that you are currently infected by. Mechanism 3, extreme suggestibility. And now we arrive at the third, the deepest, and by far the most important cause of our silence. In this state, conscious brain activity is paralyzed. The conscious personality completely vanishes. Will and discernment are completely lost. The individual becomes a total slave to unconscious impulses.
This is directly compared to a subject experiencing the complete fascination of a hypnotized state. In a very real sense, you are no longer awake.
The brain's critical faculty, that higher level part of you that applies logic, evaluates right from wrong, and decides to speak up, is suspended entirely. Human beings are left completely at the mercy of their spinal reflex actions. It's a massive downgrade. You go from being a reasoning creature to a purely reactive one. You don't speak up because the actual cognitive machinery required to formulate a protest has been literally unplugged.
Listen to this description. He is no longer himself, but has become an automaton who has ceased to be guided by his will. Think about the weight of that word, automation. A machine acting purely on the programming of the surrounding mass. If you have ever beaten yourself up for freezing in a crowd, you need to realize that making a conscious choice to speak up in this extreme state of suggestibility is physically and mentally impossible. The you who makes choices is offline. In this state, you become merely a grain of sand amid other grains of sand, which the wind stirs up at will. Just picture that for a moment. It is a beautiful, stark, and terrifying metaphor. It's a complete, involuntary surrender to the irresistible wind of the crowd. When the crowd shifts, you shift. When the crowd goes silent, you go silent. The wind is entirely in control. The conscious personality has entirely vanished. Will and discernment are lost. I want to reiterate this philosophical truth because it's so critical. You stay silent because the you that would normally speak has, for that brief, terrifying moment, ceased to exist. The brave, individual person who holds your values is temporarily buried entirely beneath the heavy, crushing weight of the collective unconscious. Returning to the self. So as we pull ourselves out of this hypnotic descent and back to our individual agency, we need to internalize a profoundly liberating truth. It is not your fault. When your voice vanished, it wasn't because you were weak. It was because you were subjected to the overwhelming arithmetic of the crowd, the infection of mental contagion, and the paralysis of extreme suggestibility. Understanding these three exact mechanisms permanently protects us from carrying the heavy burden of self-blame. You are an automaton, yes, but you do not have to remain one. Awareness is our absolute first defense. Just knowing about the illusion of anonymity, understanding how contagion spreads, and recognizing that paralyzing suggestibility, it helps us feel the hypnotic pull before it completely paralyzes our minds. The next time you are in a crowd and you feel that intoxicating rush of invincibility or that sudden urge to surrender to the group, your conscious brain will flag it. You will finally be able to see the strings trying to pull you. We're going to end this explainer with a lingering, provocative thought. The collective, psychological forces that seek to render you silent are a permanent fixture of human civilization. They aren't going anywhere. But the difference is, you are no longer unarmed. Now that you intimately know these mechanisms, will you recognize the wind before it moves you? You have your conscious will back. Use it. Keep your voice, even when the crowd demands your silence.